Okay, hi, my name is Kaylee, and I did my project over the effects that physical therapy has on individuals with Down syndrome. Um, so just a little bit of a backstory. The reason why I picked this is because I actually want to be a physical therapist and I want to work with kids with disabilities. So I just thought that Down syndrome was kind of a disability or disorder that I found some research on that I thought was very, very interesting. And so I just wanted to kind of share some of the information. So first slide is what is Down syndrome. So essentially each and every one of us are made of thousands and billions, not thousands, of cells, and each cell has a nucleus in it. Each nucleus is responsible for all of our inherited traits and also contains our chromosomes. So individuals with Down syndrome actually have an extra chromosome 21. Let's see if I can get that there. So just a couple of the physical features that they have. A lot of them have a flatter face, a flatter nose. They have a crease in their hand, a smaller stature, and then a lot of them are actually obese. So this is something we'll kind of go through, or I'll kind of talk about later on in some of the studies that I chose. We'll kind of see how physical therapy can kind of help and assist with that. So trisomy 21 is the category, I guess you could say, of Down syndrome that I chose. So trisomy 21 is actually caused by non-disjunction. And so they think that the non-disjunction is caused by an error in the cell division by the embryo, and it actually copies just an extra chromosome than a regular, or than it should be. So this is why they think that Down syndrome could be linked back to the mother. They found that only 5% of the cases are actually tracked back to the father. So for forever, they thought that it may have had to do with the mother's age whenever they got pregnant. So for the longest time, they thought over the age of 35, if you got pregnant and you had a baby, you are more likely to have a child with Down syndrome. But with the recent boom of younger mothers, they began to see that 80% of the cases, their mothers were actually under the age of 35. So I thought that was really interesting. They're still kind of seeing, where are we at with the research, what actually causes Down syndrome, because it's not inherited, but it is a genetic disease. So it's kind of interesting. So just kind of some of the new research that I thought was really interesting is that individuals with Down syndrome are actually living longer than they ever have before. So right now they're living at average around the age of 60, and so they think that the individuals that are living longer are actually predicted to double by the year 2030. So not that far away. And the issue is a lot of these individuals are actually very dependent on their caretakers, whether that's their mother or their father or brother or sister, grandma, grandpa, whoever it is. But if they're outliving these individuals, then this could cause issues because, if they're very dependent on them, then, we need to find a way to kind of help them be more independent, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of where physical therapy kind of jumps in, like how can we help them with that? So like I said, how can physical therapy help? So as I'll talk about a little bit in the next couple slides is obesity is a huge issue, musculoskeletal disorders are a huge issue, depression, Alzheimer's are huge issues, and these are all things that physical therapists work on a day-to-day basis. So I think that physical therapy obviously cannot cure Down syndrome, but what it can do is it could really help them improve their quality of life, and especially as they age, it can allow them to be, more independent. No. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my dog's chewing up my pillow. So just a couple of the physical and the neurological conditions that individuals are developing as they age. Just a couple of the neurological are depression and Alzheimer's, and these are two just very common. Alzheimer's is common just across the board in general. So physical therapists, there's a lot of studies going on right now as to how physical therapy can actually help individuals with Alzheimer's. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that they can really help. Depression occurs in about 30% of all of the and the 30% of the Down syndrome population. So obviously that's a pretty big chunk of these individuals, and so I think that physical therapy can really help. Physical activity in general. About like 40% of the individuals with Down syndrome actually don't seek day-to-day physical activity. And so I think that just some of these studies, like they're doing, 12 weeks, 2 to 3 times a week for 30 to 35 minutes, not only are they like just getting out there and getting active, but they're also having that social interaction one-on-one with different people they're doing the study with, etc. So I think this is really good. A lot of the times in like PE classes, there's that barrier between individuals with Down syndrome and individuals without Down syndrome, and so they're like, oh well, they can't do the same things that these people can do. But I think that physical therapy can really help with destroying those boundaries and just kind of unifying these, like just the individuals or the children or the adults, etc. So just kind of interesting. A couple of the physical conditions are thyroid dysfunction, cardiovascular disorders, musculoskeletal disorders, and obesity. So just a couple of the hypothyroid is very common. As stated before, obesity is very, very common in individuals with Down syndrome. Musculoskeletal disorders such as arthritis and osteoporosis, which, as stated before, physical therapists deal with those things on a day-to-day basis. So I think that they could really help them with these different disorders. And then cardiovascular. So obviously helping them with their cardiovascular endurance could really help them kind of improve that aspect. So the first study that I wanted to kind of look at, these people, they looked at how can they strengthen the quadriceps femoris and how can that affect their dynamic balance in things such as walking, running, skipping, whatever it is, jogging, hopping, jump, whatever. And so I think that this was a really interesting study. It was, as stated before, it was 12 weeks long, at a frequency of 2 to 3 times a week. And essentially they wanted to see, can individuals with Down syndrome lose weight? Can they maintain the muscle that they build on? How can this help them, as I stated, with their balance issues, their stability? So I think this was really, really interesting. So what they found in this study is they saw major improvements in their isokinetic peak torque and their endurance, muscular endurance, and their quadriceps, because that's the muscle group they really focused on. And then, like I said, it also helped with their dynamic balance. So they did see that strength training in individuals with Down syndrome really assisted them with all those things that they were wanting. So positive outcomes there. Another research study that was done by scientist Moron, and essentially she looked at individuals or Down syndrome infants, and so since there is that developmental almost like barrier, children with Down syndrome have a lot more issues through their developmental ages and their infant stage. With like crawling and walking, just different like stability, balance, locomotor skills, just in general, they have a lot more issues with that than a normal infant may have. So essentially they looked at how can physical therapy really help them, and how can that allow them to develop, I guess quicker would be the right word for that. So the way that they tested this was they did a basic motor skills like test. And so they gave them a score at the beginning and evaluated them. And then they did a 12-week program for 30 to 50 minutes, 3 times a week. And they pretty much worked on things with them like rolling over. They looked at what can they do without assistance versus what can they do with assistance, etc. And so what they found in this study is, and they studied 3 individuals with Down syndrome. Sorry, I forgot to mention that part. And what they found is they actually did improve by at least 1 score or 1 point in their score. So it was found that physical therapy actually is very effective for infants. It really helped them with their walking. Before some of them could not walk without assistance. And after the study, they saw, that they were actually walking with no issue at all. So with a lot of the practice they've been doing over the time, the different exercises they did to help kind of strengthen their muscles so that they were able to do these things. So they saw that was very effective. And then the last study I did, it's called Effectiveness of Physical Therapy in Developing Basic Motor Skills in Down Syndrome Patients. So this was, again, a study for younger kids, for infants. And the goals of the study were to gain strength and endurance, stability. And then a really big one that kind of made this a little bit different was it really helped them with their posture. So how can their head line with their shoulders to their hips, to their knees, to their ankles, all the way down. And they used kind of a different technique here. So they did therapeutic massages. They did do a little bit of strength training. So they did more therapy work as opposed to the other 2 studies were more physical activity oriented. And so pretty much as before, they evaluated the sitting, the crawling, rolling, laying, and kneeling. And pretty much what they found is these children, as they went through this physical therapy program of 12 weeks, they found that their balance and coordination improved a lot. Their strength obviously improved. So they were able to fix their posture issues, etc. So I think that these studies are really awesome because it really helps kind of, like I said, and as these children will develop throughout life, there's more separation between the individuals without Down syndrome and the individuals with Down syndrome. As they start out here, and then they develop a lot slower, and then the individuals without Down syndrome are developing more rapidly, and so that caused that separation when it comes to physical activity and what they can and what they cannot do, their independence. So I think if physical therapy can really help them kind of stay on top of it, and if it kind of help them see okay, what exercises can we do to kind of take out those barriers between the two individuals, I think that this could really help individuals as they age be more independent in their life, mentally and physically. So in my conclusion, I said that researchers found that Down syndrome patients should be participate in physical therapy. Obviously, this can really help with obesity, as I said before, the musculoskeletal, cardiovascular, thyroid issues, and the neurological issues all around. As I said, there's a lot of new research in the physical therapy area, and so I think that applying the new research, we could find something new about these individuals, and we can find things that really improve their quality of life in general. And so I think that that's really important, since they are living longer and they're becoming more independent, and they're outliving their parents or whatever it is. We need to make sure that they're okay and that they can do things on their own. And I think that there are some individuals with Down syndrome that totally can and they're totally fine, and then there's some individuals with Down syndrome that they have more of an issue with that. So there's more of a variety So I think that not all individuals with Down syndrome may need physical therapy, but if there's an individual who is having a lot of issues with, their development, they have lifelong developmental delays. So, if they're having issues with that, we look and see how can physical therapists help them, and that could really just improve their quality of life in general. And then my last slide is citations. So hope you enjoy.